So, hi everyone, welcome to today's Seeblue Smarts, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Ed Armishaw. Ed is a really experienced sales leader, I think 17 plus years in role now working with Salesforce, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to have Ed come and share what he's seeing, in market, just trends and things given the current economic climate and I guess forecast for the next 2 years. So absolutely delighted to have you join us, Ed. So, I mean, I guess what are you seeing happening out there? What, buying behaviours, are they changing or have they changed? What's going on?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on Seeblue Smarts. It's lovely to be here. You saying that 17 years experience makes me feel very old, especially because we met at my first employer 17 years ago, Orla. Crikey me, that's flown by. Let's go diving right into it. What am I seeing? Well, I think we're all seeing, particularly across, I work in software sales in SaaS, and we are definitely seeing a slowing of buying behavior. No surprise in line with the current recessionary environment that we have here in the UK and that's taking place across much of the world. We're still seeing loads of opportunity though, I have to be honest, but definitely what worked for sellers over the past few years does still work, but needs some refinement and needs some changes and needs some adaptation to the market. One big trend that I've noticed this year particularly is a huge increase in the amount of CFO engagement that I'm seeing sellers in my team and in our broader teams starting to have to engage in, where before we often would work with, depending on, whether it be CMO, CIO, CTO, maybe a CRO, we're now starting to see the CFO come into the conversation a little bit more. But that's no surprise because everyone's just much more aware about any spend really, and particularly what we do in SaaS, which generally tends to be more OpEx related. Like, it's completely understandable, isn't it? When you
yeah. So you're seeing, people are still buying, they're still making purchase decisions, and I guess we expect that to continue next year, right? But more interrogation or really thorough evaluation of purchase decisions?
Both. I think the more interrogation definitely, but it's also the way that people are evaluating things perhaps has shifted slightly. I've been working in the world of MarTech, something that I know probably more than I know about, at least in B2B. But I'm working in MarTech for the last few years, and previously we'd talk a lot to senior marketers about growth. We'd be selling a growth story, for want of a better word, right? We'd be talking about aligning to growth initiatives within the organizations we work with. We still do talk about growth, but we're also having to focus on the bottom line as well in the conversation. And we're starting to see, I firmly believe actually now that the biggest competitors that most organizations will see, not just ones like mine, most sellers are going to see, isn't actually another company. It's just we're not going to do anything right now. I think that's probably the biggest thing as we come into Q4. If you run run financial year for your fiscal, it's going to be coming up next year. We run to end of January. Lots of companies run calendar year, so they're in their Q4 in the last month now. And I think the sellers being able to articulate the cost of doing nothing to an organization has never been more important. And if they don't understand that, if they haven't done the discovery, they haven't built up the pain and then got to the second and third and fourth levels of kind of associated pain below that, they're not going to be able to tell that cost of doing nothing really strongly. And I think that's where they might start to fall down.
That's a really interesting observation, actually, because I think the decision to do nothing has always been a competitive scenario, right? That every sales motion, whether it's recessionary or not, you should, want to, objection handle against. But sounds like that's really coming much more to the fore. So how do you see salespeople then need to adapt or change their approach heading into, into the year ahead?
So I think the first thing says it's not wholesale change. I think it's edits, certainly on those sellers that are very experienced. So there's probably sort of 5 areas. Maybe I'll cover them all, maybe a couple of them in depth. We've done one already, but I think number one is that whole cost of inaction, right? We've got to help build cases to go to very senior finance leaders in organizations, or for your champion, the person you're working with, to go and take to a CFO, to really, really show the cost of the reason why doing nothing isn't a good idea right now. I think the second, which I have been a long time proponent of, particularly when doing large 7-figure transactions, which I've been, fortunate enough to work on quite a few of now, is both exec access and also exec peering earlier and earlier in a sales cycle. It was always been that way of like people brought their exec in to sort of close the deal. I think about it the exact opposite way around. For me, the mega deal sellers are the ones that take an exec in from almost the beginning. They parachute themselves in with the exec. I think that's always been something that's been important, but right now exec access is critical. So if people don't have that and don't have a way to either get to maybe the C-level they're not used to talking to. So for me, we work a lot with CMOs. We don't see as many CEOs and as many CFOs as we've talked about. Getting to those types of people, as well as your traditional, the traditional contacts that you're working with, is super important. I think never has there been a more kind of apt time to get to hard returns on investment and really be able to nail those down. So it's that cost of doing nothing, but also be able to really show that, almost on one slide, this is the return, right? And Ed of 3 years ago would hate me for saying this, because I always actually got frustrated with the over-reliance on returns on investment as a metric that sellers sold on, or kind of based the whole case around. I'd much rather look at other areas. But for me right now, hard ROI is really, really critical.
Yeah.
And then the kind of, if you can do that, then particularly from a selling of technology, whether it's physical or digital or software or consumption based, whatever the model, right, there is always a huge consolidation opportunity. We work within the marketing industry. There's always that slide that comes up every year. I forget who puts it out. It's like, hey, here's 8,000 marketing vendors right now.
The Scott Brinker.
That one.
Yeah.
That always makes me chuckle, because actually there's always a massive opportunity. If you work for, I work for a company that has the marketing cloud, which is the area my team works with, has got all sorts of incredible capabilities within it. We can do quite a lot from a consolidation perspective. So if you're not selling a point solution, which many, many sellers aren't now, which is great, being able to actually show the sort of onward consolidation is again, it sounds quite obvious, but it's a really, really great way of kind of focusing the mind. And then the last one, and this is always the same, and you'll like this because I know that you at Seeblue will do part of this as your action, but customer referrals right now are gold. Getting people to talk not just about the nice things they do with your technology, that's part of the course. Every case study in the world will show that, but actually the real nuts and bolts conversation that says, this is how we got it live. This is the challenges we had with it. This is how we overcame those challenges. This is where the organization that you're potentially going to buy from have got, this is what they do really well, and this is what they don't do so well post-sales. Those types of conversations are just worth their weight in gold. So if you have customers that will do referrals for you right now, they're like manna from heaven, and I'd be making sure they're in front of your potential buyers now ahead of your close.
Absolutely. I think, existing customers who've had that, positive experience, been on that journey and are out the other side, they will always deliver that message to prospective clients, speaking their language also, where you bring the right peer group together, but they will articulate the pains, the challenges, the positive outcomes, I think, better than any, sales or marketing motion ever could. So
exactly.
I would totally agree with that, Ed. And I think, you made some really, really interesting points there. I love the fact of bringing your executives together earlier, recognizing you have to make that business case, an ROI statement up front. You're engaging with different stakeholder groups, which then leads me on to, because marketing has a role to play in and can support all of those activities. So I think it was we spoke briefly, and I shared there was a recent survey of CMOs and things that they were struggling with. So I'm working with their sales colleagues, so being able to get those deep account insights. So maybe we're talking here about large 6, 8, 7-figure deals. We're looking to really understand and tailor our engagement to particular accounts, but actually they struggle with account insights. And then similarly bringing that together and developing that shared strategy. So any thoughts or insights that you would give? How can these two come together, and how can you work in the most effective way to even deliver on some of those things we spoke about? Maybe
I think the sales and marketing relationship has always been critical. It's becoming ever more critical. I think it's really funny talking to you about this, because not only did I marry a marketer from Vodafone, your old colleague, I can't remember if your other half was in sales, but was around that area, as did Helen, which is hilarious. But the relationship between sales and marketing has always been absolutely critical. Right now, I think it plays a more, the best way to put this, it probably plays a more important role in some aspects, because twofold. Let me just break them down. So a couple of different aspects. The first is around this whole concept of the buying community. So there are varying stats, but I think most people would attest to the fact that there are now more people that are better informed in every buying decision. So numbers vary between 8 and 14. I've seen sort of on average buying large enterprise deals, the 6 and 7-figure deals that you talk about. So for a salesperson to be able to get across those people is really hard. Firstly, to identify them, but then also engage them is really difficult. And I think that's where very targeted, to your point, identified marketing can be incredibly powerful at all stages actually of the sale. Something that I've seen done very, very well, and also not very well over the years. The other aspect that I think is really critical actually, and this is maybe a bit tangential, but go with me on it, is there is this trend when we hit recessionary environments that goes all the way back to the Wall Street crash in the 1920s, of marketers being forced to pull brand spend, particularly / brand budgets. But it's weird how it works in convex, that those organizations that don't / brand and actually increase their brand spend during these times, okay, they might fare as well as the other organizations do during the difficult times, but they come out of them faster, they gain share faster. So I think that there's two very, very different aspects of marketing that can have huge impacts on sales results today when it comes to actually engaging buying communities, but also tomorrow, down the line, because we hope, in the UK, I think we're probably going to be looking at this for another 12 to 18 months. Then we should start to see the kind of the seeds of the green shoots of change coming about in the economy. But I think it's very easy at a time like this to immediately rush to short-term tactics. And that, whilst I understand why, get it, it sort of flies in the face of the general rule of buying, which is 95/5, right, in B2B, which is like 95% of people aren't ready to buy. In which case, trying to push them into a lead list for some seller to call or whatever isn't really going to help things along. It might hit some metrics for you, but actually it probably won't lead to more revenue. So I'm always interested in marketers who are coming to the table with ideas about, okay, this is how we're going to engage a community you might not know yet but need to. So some of the kind of the brilliant ABM work that goes on, that's always really great. And then as I say, the flip convex of that is investing in brand now, and keep investing in brand now. Don't push it all towards performance marketing because you think that's what the CRO needs, because maybe it isn't.
No, it isn't. Well, I call that the tactical tailspin, is how I refer to it, when people go too far down the short-term reactive route, and it is quite difficult to get yourself out of it, because you're constantly then on that treadmill, or in that motion of constantly having to do short-term activities to try and maintain momentum. So it's I do talk about it myself. It's important to get that balance. Yes, do some, short-term reactive responsive measures, but make that, the minority of what you're doing. Stay focused on your strategy, stay focused on mid to long-term, activities. But I mean, I do, my view, I think we can get marketers can, while still operating strategically and with a long-term outlook, can almost get in the trenches with sales. So actually, where can we help you to solve some gaps that we have in our sales knowledge, whether that's helping to identify who the right individuals are to target, providing some of that account insight, building those executive engagement opportunities, and creating that opportunity in nice small format events where executives can come together, where peers can share knowledge. So those customer advocates that we spoke about, again, I think there's a great way that actually, while still potentially in a more short-term reactive way, but actually are really, really helping to develop that sales motion and accelerate that sales cycle.
Can I ask you a question, Orla?
Of course.
I'm super interested in the role that marketers can play with sales enablement teams, because and kind of go-to-market teams, because the reality is that it's very difficult as a seller when you're faced with the pressures that all sellers are faced with. It's very hard to kind of get your head out the weeds and kind of look up. But I've worked with some amazing sales enablement teams over the years who are like laser focused in on where we need to go and where the gaps are and what the propositions that could meet those gaps. I'm just interested in your career, either in Seeblue or previously. Have you done much work with that kind of trying to meet the knowledge gap that exists between product set and sales?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does relate back to the previous point about avoiding being too reactive. And it's so easy for marketers to get pulled down to that level, but actually you do have to be able to step up, to look around. Marketers are the voice of the customer and the voice of the market, right? We do need to look forward. What's happening?
Yeah. First
in a sector, in an account, what's important to them, then we can put that messaging lens, right? So we can look at where are the ways in which we can, address that opportunity, align our value proposition, align our, our propositional and solution level messaging, look at our activation plan, and share that knowledge with our sales colleagues. So whether, if you have an enablement team in place, fantastic. Many organizations don't. And often, marketers do step in to address that gap. And I think it's really important that where you're seeing that shift in the market, where you're building messaging and positioning to, respond to that you don't keep that information within marketing. You share that knowledge, share that with the people who are face to face with the customer, right? Give them the tools, the insights, the information, the content that can support them in having the best, the most effective, and the most valuable to the prospective customer that you can have, right? So that's always been my approach. That's something that we do, within Seeblue, and we do for our clients, because we do. I know that's a resource, like it's resource intensive, and you've got a team of marketers with the best will and intention in the world can get sidetracked or pulled in different directions. So that's where we absolutely saw that and developed that within Seeblue to address some of those gaps. Yeah.
So I've without even knowing I was doing it, I've teed you up there. Beautiful. There you go. I'm
the
perfect guest. What can I say?
And completely off the cuff. I had no idea that was coming. But yeah, that's at the end of the day, I think I strongly believe in that approach.
And I think that comes back to this role of sort of sales and marketing, is that it's literally, we have been bedfellows for life, right? This is the nature of an organization. We're the point of the arrow, or whatever the expression you want to use is. But as we become more and more data and kind of insights rich, which is a nice way of saying heavy and bloated in certain cases as well, let's be honest, being able to cut through that and actually understand what the trends that are really important to your point, that prospect, that sector, your product, your proposition, how to position it, all those things, it gets harder and harder for salespeople to do.
Yeah.
And particularly those that are starting in their careers, like the ones that are earlier on, I envy them, and I also don't, in that they're entering a profession that is far more kind of established than it was when I started in the early noughties. But it's also, it's very professional now. The world of SaaS, the world of software sales, the world of tech sales is something that people aspire to be in. But because of this, people are getting into these roles earlier and younger and aren't getting the experience in years and years of kind of understanding their organization, their prop. They're being thrown in front of customers and not really, it's almost the classic kind of sink or swim stuff. And I'm really lucky. We have a phenomenal enablement program, sets of enablement programs at Salesforce where I work, but I'm always cognizant that it isn't the case in lots of other organizations. And that flow of information backwards and forwards that I think is so critical between sales, marketing, enablement, all of that piece.
Absolutely. And you wanted to live somewhere, right? Because you absolutely have new people joining, taking on their first sales roles, growing within organizations. But you naturally have, within the tech sector, marketing, sales, like you have movement, right? So you will constantly have new account managers, senior, even experienced people coming to take on an account. And, the faster you can get those people up to speed, the more the transition from a customer point of view is more seamless as well. So it's about creating that knowledge, capturing it, sharing it, and having it accessible, where you can make that transition smooth. And it's all about delivering that frictionless experience for customers.
Absolutely. Or as much as possible.
Absolutely, as much as possible.